Hey everyone, and welcome back to another yoga class. Happy Thursday. I hope your week has been going really well and that you've been enjoying all this beautiful sunshine. It is so refreshing and I'm very thankful for it. Today's class, we're really focusing on chaturangas. So chaturanga is the push-up portion of when we're going through our vinyasa sequences or sun salutations, where we're coming through downward facing dog, upward facing dog. So it's that push-up portion. So the actual title of chaturanga is chaturanga dandasana, which is the four-limb staff pose, and it's when we're in the 90-degree holding phase of the push-up, which Owen's had you do in many workouts lately. So it's right here. This is the four-limb staff pose. And so in today's class, we're really going to be focusing on building up the strength to hold that pose, to come through a full vinyasa where you don't actually lower all the way down, but you come through chaturanga straight up into your upward facing dog. So this is one of the most basic and fundamental movements that's incorporated into almost all yoga classes or yoga flow classes anyways. And so we really want to make sure that we're working on the foundation of this pose, building up the strength to feel more confident and comfortable in it, and challenging ourselves by knowing the different variations that are available until we can actually move up to doing that pose and doing it well. So today is all about that. We will simply just start in a seated position. Again, taking whatever seated position is comfortable for you. And I do want to say, just to make sure that you have a strap, again, that could be a belt, a towel, blanket, elastic TheraBand if you have something like that for workouts, or if you've been in physiotherapy, you might have an elastic band. Just to have those nearby, as well as a pillow, because we will be using those at the beginning and end of class. So if you need to grab one, pause the video right now, grab that, come back, and we'll all meet in a seated position. So in seated position, again, we want to be sitting up nice and tall on our sits bones, so no rounding in the low back. Sitting up nice and tall, chest is nice and open, and you can place your hands wherever is comfortable for you. And we'll start by warming up the neck, because it's quite common when holding planks and going through push-ups that we really tense up, especially in our upper traps, and can get sore and muscle fatigue. So we're going to warm them up nicely, stretch them, and then of course I'll be cueing you throughout the movements to make sure that we're keeping this area as loose as it should be. So we'll start by drawing chin to chest, elongating the back of the neck, and then go down and around so your right ear is over your right shoulder. Now stretching out the left side of the neck. Come down and around, switching sides. Ooh, my hair's getting in the way. And come down and around the other way. I got some funky hair for today's class. Down and around. And we'll come through one more time each side. So back over to the right. And then back over to the left. Head comes back to center. And then draw all the way back up to a high seated position. So we'll reach for our strap now. And we'll come through some shoulder flossing. Again, we're really working on shoulders today, and so we want to warm them up properly and get them ready for movement. So we'll come through a few rounds of shoulder flossing. Again, this is something we've done quite a few times. So just make sure that you're coming past shoulder width. Again, it all depends on how tight you are, but we're most likely looking at past shoulder width. And then sitting up nice and tall. We'll draw the strap up overhead and then begin to lower it down behind us. So again, we don't want the elbow breaking. We want to keep that nice long line, as well as we don't want to be pushing our chest forward, getting a lot of arcing in the back, or rounding under to come through and like tucking up the head. Those are indicators that the strap is too short and you just need to take a wider grip, which is fine. We're just warming up the muscles right now. They're probably a bit cold, or maybe feeling tight and sore from another workout. And so we want to be gentle coming through shoulder flossing, and you might notice after going through a few rounds that you're able to shorten your grip. And again, you can stop in areas that might feel extra tight or sticky, kind of hang out there, maybe move around a little bit. Again, finding whatever feels best for you, and then coming back around and through, just to help those extra sticky areas to warm up. And just come through a few more rounds. Again, just going at your own pace. Don't need to be whipping through it, but a nice steady pace here. We'll come one more time around, and then we can place the straps off to the side. We won't be using the strap for the rest of class. Awesome. All right, and we're going to warm up our wrists. So again, holding push-ups, planks. Wrists are, for me, have always been the first thing to go. My wrists get so sore and uncomfortable, and I need to stop because my wrists are really achy. A big part of this for me was, yes, wrist strength, but also tolerance. So after doing yoga quite frequently and now having to do it at least twice a week, if not more, my wrist strength and just overall tolerance and mobility has improved. So I'm able to withstand it and not feel any ache in my wrists. It's pretty rare when I feel achy wrists anymore, but you probably will experience that if you're not used to putting this kind of load on. So we really want to make sure that we're warming up our wrists. So we'll begin by just simply doing some wrist circles, starting in one direction, and then we will move to the next, or the opposite direction. Just warming them up. And then switch. I also found when I first started yoga, a lot of the wrist warm-ups that teachers would do actually made my wrist feel worse at first, because if you don't deal with wrist issues or weak wrists, or maybe you have really good mobility. I naturally don't have great wrist mobility, and that's structural, so it's not muscular for me. That's as far as I can go because I'm on bone. So whereas some people can get way past 90 and I'm at like maybe 80 degrees. And so I would find some wrist warm-ups quite uncomfortable, and already I'd be like, oh my gosh, and now I have to do a full class on my wrists. So I'm going to take it a little bit easier, just knowing from my own experience that not everyone appreciates that, and I think you can do a really good wrist warm-up without going too intense and then being able to do a class on top of it. So now we'll just draw wrist or your fingertips kind of towards your hands and then flip sides. Just again, a few rounds, not putting too much pressure on, but we're just warming it up, nice and gentle. We'll switch sides. Now we'll come into a tabletop position. So again, in a proper tabletop position, shoulders stacked over your wrists, hips over top of your knees. The spine is long, and we'll do a few circles over top of the wrist. So we're just coming around and kind of doing some circles here. Again, just getting them warmed up. Just a few rounds one way and then the other. So do one more in this direction, and then we're going to switch. So we'll come around and switch. last time around. And then sink your hips back. Flip your hands so you have fingertips pointing towards your knees and the top of your hand on the mat. I like to place my fingertips kind of underneath my knees here. And then try to flatten your hands on the mat and move back. You can rock in and out as well if that's a little more comfortable for you. And you might just be here, and that's fine. I'm pretty sure this is where I started, and I just hated it. So again, taking it easy on your wrists. This is just the warm-up, so you don't want to feel like garbage right away. It is just a nice warm-up for the wrists. All right. I'm going to just give them a nice little shake out. And then if at any time during today's class your wrists are feeling quite sore, something that you can do, you can just shake them out, kind of move them around, or you can, with your opposite hand, kind of make a lobster claw, clasp at the top of your hand and pull down. And this might give you some nice release here. Or you might have some really tight forearm muscles and you can dig around with your thumb, and wherever you hit a sensitive spot, just dig in there. It won't feel great, but a lot of the time these tight muscles here can cause wrist pain and restriction. So paying attention to maybe if you have really tight forearm muscles. So that's some nice relief that you can do. I like to also kind of push up through here, kind of causing some gapping just to give it relief. But you'll get to learn what your wrists like and what they don't like. And again, you can always come back into a child's pose or just take a breather if you need to at all through today's class, if your wrists are getting sore, if your arms are getting tired. But with that being said, let's get started into how to upgrade your chaturanga so that in classes, your push-up plank poses are spectacular. So again, meeting in tabletop position. So we're really focusing on proper hand placement here, because so much of this movement that we're coming through, like our push-up movement, comes from proper hand placement. So we're spreading our fingers as wide as they can go. So we're not doing these little, like, I don't know, baby hands where they're not really doing anything. Our hands are very, very active and wide, 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 as if you're trying to hit as many keys as you can on a keyboard. So your index fingers are pointing forward, and then your thumb, you're kind of making an L shape with your thumbs. As I said many times before, elbow pits are pointing forward and your elbows are pointing back. And the reason we do this is when we come through our push-up portion, or when we're getting to that chaturanga dandasana, that 90-degree position, we want our elbows coming back and snug into our ribs rather than flaring out. So if you have your hands drawn so that your fingers are pointing in towards each other, you're going to be flaring out your arms. So we really want to make sure that we have that elbow direction that's drawing straight back when you're coming down. And then again, spine is nice and long. So head, you're basically just looking a few inches in front of you so that you're not tucking your chin or lifting it too high. We want that nice long spine. And then we're doing active pushing with the hands. So you're trying to push the mat away, and then you'll probably feel our fingers are so active into the mat that basically the mid finger, that knuckle, is almost lifting away. So you're kind of like tenting your fingers. They're very, very active here, and that can also help take some unnecessary pressure out of your wrist. You might notice over time that by doing that like tenting action with your fingers, you won't find as much of a wrist problem. So we're actively pushing into the mat and protracting our shoulder blades. So we're really pushing our shoulder blades away from one another. So there's almost rounding in the upper back. So I'll show you from here. So this would just be like a neutral back. I'm not doing anything. I'm not trying to protract my shoulders. I'm not trying to separate them. But when I start pushing, there's that rounding. I'm really pushing the mat away, and that is what we're looking for. There's so much strength and activity happening when we're pushing into the mat. So that's the movement that we're looking for in the upper back. And that's not like a one-time thing. It's as long as we're holding that pose, that's what we're looking for. So in here, even when you're down, it's very, very active. And we'll start in bear pose first because that kind of takes the lower body out of it and you don't have to worry about that caving in the lower back. So that's one of the reasons I like to start with bear pose at first. It's hard, it's not an easy pose, but it's a very good warm-up. So place your hands underneath your shoulders, fingers nice and wide, kind of doing that tenting action. Push between your shoulder blades and then tuck your toes and lift your knees just a few inches away from the mat. And we'll hold for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come down onto your knees. Bring your toes together and sink your hips down and back to come into child's pose. Let your head rest. And then if you need to, you can rock out your wrists. Again, we want to be very kind to them because we will be doing lots of planks and push-ups. Take a final breath here. And we'll come back into our tabletop position. And we're gonna do bear pose one more time. Really focusing on that upper body. Whoop, hair's doing crazy things. Again, just really focusing on that upper body, that movement, that protracting of the shoulders. We wanna make sure that we get that down pat before we start bringing the legs into it. So, find the proper positioning of your hands. Tuck your toes, push between your shoulders, and then kind of rock more of your weight into your hands. And then lift your knees. We'll hold it for half the time this time. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Lower your knees down. Put your hips onto your knees, but we'll come into just a kneeling position and massage out the wrist, maybe try that claw, lobster claw pull, or whatever feels good for you. And then we're going to move into a half plank. So our knees are just going to be down, which is always an option when we're coming through in our flow classes, when we're coming through that vinyasa flow, where we're up in a position, we step back to plank. You always have the option to lower your knees, come through your push-up, coming through your back bend, and then into downward dog. So this is how your position, your setup should be if you're coming into knees down plank. Fingers nice and wide underneath your shoulders. Index fingers pointing forward, spine is long. And then move your knees back just a little bit so that you're making a long line and your hips aren't up really high. And then you can either have your feet on the ground or up, it really doesn't matter. So we're actually gonna come through a push-up, slow and controlled, coming all the way down. And then we'll push back into child's pose. And we're gonna do this 5 times. So I'm gonna go over it the first time and then we'll do it all together 5 times. So start by pushing your shoulders away from one another, really digging down to the ground, tenting your fingers. And then you're squeezing your elbows in by your sides as if you're trying to brush your rib cage as you lower down to your chest. So we're coming chest first rather than sinking down like this, and that's hips first. If this is really hard for you, what you can do is just focusing on chest first by coming down like this. So your hips are exaggerated up and then just lowering all the way down. So you have either option depending on how difficult a push-up is for you. So all together, knees down on the ground, shift the weight forward into your hands, protracting your shoulders, really pushing them away. Arms and hands are active. Squeeze your elbows in by your sides as you slowly lower down, chest first and then your hips. Extend them nice and long here. And then push up and back into child's pose. Again, taking any movements that you need to for your wrists. And then meeting back into that knees down plank pose. Protract the shoulders, squeeze your elbows in by your rib cage as you lower down, chest first, all the way down, and then push back through your child's pose. Come back up through your knees down plank. Protract the shoulders, lean into your hands, and squeeze slowly lowering down. Push all the way back up through child's pose. We have 2 more of this version. And come up through your plank, modified plank. Push the floor away. Squeeze your elbows as you lower down. And then push all the way back up into child's pose. One last time. Come into your modified plank. Lower down, slow and controlled. Push up through child's pose. Come up to a kneeling position and rotate your wrists or shake them out again, whatever movement feels best for you. So now we'll come into a full plank. And again, we're going to be lowering all the way down and we'll push back through a child's pose. So we're just building on top of what we've been doing. So in our full plank, hands are going to be the exact same. Our upper back, very active. And then when you step back, you want basically your toes to be stacked right under the top of your heels. And then we rock forward to shift the weight into our hands as we come through the push-up. So we're stepping back like this. So we're as if we're trying to push our heel into the wall behind us. And then we shift our weight forwards and then lower down. And so part of the reason we do this is when you're coming into chaturanga dandasana, you're coming straight through to upward facing dog. And then again in upward facing dog, the difference between that and cobra pose is cobra we set up so our hands are underneath our shoulders. And then upward facing dog we set up so that our hands are by our ribs. So if we didn't pull forward like that, we would come down so that our hands were here. But when we pull forwards, now our hands are underneath our ribs. And so that just allows us to pull through and get that opening in the chest. Whereas if we didn't pull through, we'd be very closed off and not have that proper alignment. In these like gentle back bends, we're really trying to open up the chest. So that's why we do that rocking motion. So now that we have that out of the way, step back into your high plank, making sure to press through your upper body first before you step through. So pushing through your heels here, spine is nice and long. Shift your weight forward, squeeze your elbows in by your sides, slowly lowering down, chest first and then hips, and then push back into child's pose. take one more breath here, and then we'll all meet back into our full plank. Press into your hands, tenting your fingers, step your feet back as if you're pushing into a wall. Shift your weight forward, lower down, chest first, and then your hips. And then send yourself back into your child's pose. Make your way back into your plank. Shift the weight into your hands, step your feet back. Heels over top of your toes, spine is long. Shift the weight into your hands, slowly lowering down. And then send your hips back through to child's. We'll do this 2 more times. Come up through your plank. Stepping back, finding that length. Push through your shoulders. Shift the weight into your hands. Squeeze in by your sides. Lowering all the way down. And then pushing back into child's pose. And we'll do this 1 more time. Shift into your plank pose. Fingers spread nice and wide, not losing the placement of your fingers. Shift the weight into your hands. Slowly lower down. And then push up and back into child's pose. Push yourself up into a half kneeling position, and we'll shake out the wrists here. Again, just finding the movements that feel best for you. Everyone's a little bit different with what they like to do, or maybe your wrists are feeling fine. So those are the 3 kind of beginning phases. You can start in bear pose to really work the upper body and get used to that protracting and pushing feeling. Then you can come into your modified plank where your knees on the ground. And within that you have the 2 options. You can really exaggerate the chest first and then hips. Or if you're feeling pretty comfortable with that, you just lower down everything together. But again, we do not want sagging hips. After you feel comfortable with that, that's when you can step all the way into your full plank. Again, this is now incorporating the lower body, so you really have to make sure that you're finding integrity in the lower half so that you're not caving through the belly and the hips, or that you're not sticking your bum up too far. And then from there we come into our 4-limb staff pose, chaturanga dandasana, where we're coming through at 90 degrees. So I'm just going to do like a modified version. We're coming through until we're at roughly 90, and then pushing all the way up into downward facing dog. That's the goal. So we'll come into that next. Again, if this is too difficult for you, then just practice the version that was doable but challenging for you. But this is for those who would like to try, so that when you're coming through any of your sun styles or any of your vinyasas, you're able to do that full flow. Even if you're just able to do it maybe once or twice, once you start incorporating it, it'll become easier and easier for you, and then you won't have to modify partway through the class. But it's great to at least be trying it and incorporating it for as long as you can. Now, doing it at the end of class can make it a little bit more challenging because our wrists and arms are getting a bit of a workout. So we're only going to do it twice, and then we're going to finish today's class with 2 sun salés, so you can choose whichever variation you would like to do, and then we will be done. So we're going to set ourselves up just like we did in our full plank version. So our hands underneath the shoulders, tenting the fingers, index fingers pointing forward, an L shape with our thumbs, elbow pit pointing forwards, elbow pointing backwards, pushing up between the shoulder blades, really trying to separate our scapula, stepping the feet back so that Our heels are over top of our toes or relatively in that area. So we're kind of rocking as if we're trying to push into the wall behind us. Shift the weight into your hands, lower down through 90, and then you're just pulling through into upward facing dog. So again, in upward facing dog, our chest is open, our hands are stacked underneath our shoulders, and then our knees, our thighs, everything is lifted except for the tops of our feet. And then you can push back through child's pose. Take one more breath, and then we'll pull through to our plank. So realistically, your hands don't really have to move all that much because we're just moving fluidly through those positions. So step back into your plank. And again, shifting that weight forward so that you can squeeze, 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 and when you get to 90, you just flip up. And then send your hips back into child's pose. You know what, let's do that one more time. Good plan, good plan. So push up through to plank, heels pushing into an imaginary wall. Shift your weight forward, squeeze, 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 and then push up through upward facing dog. And send your hips back into child's pose. And we'll all sit up. Give our wrists a nice little shake, a nice little relax. And then we'll meet at the top of our mat in Tadasana. So at the top of your mat, in Tadasana, toes are together, heels slightly apart, or taking a hips width apart. Arms are down by your sides, palms facing open, chest is nice and open. Inhale, sweep your arms up overhead. Exhale, hinging at the hips to forward folds. Come up through flat back. And then return to your forward fold, planting your palms and stepping back to your high plank, high push-up. Choosing whichever variation that you feel most comfortable with. Shift the weight into your hands. Come all the way down or through chaturanga, dandasana, into the back bend of your choice. This time, tuck your toes, send your hips up and back into downward facing dog. Pedal out your feet here. Our lower body hasn't done too much work. Take two more nice deep breaths here. And then look between your hands, bend your knees, and step up to the front of your mat into forward folds. Come up through flat back and return to your forward fold. On strong legs, sweep your arms all the way up overhead, coming to stand. Exhale, palms to heart center. Our last time. Inhale, your arms up overhead. Exhale, forward fold. Open your chest to flat back. Come back through forward folds. Plant your palms, step your feet back to high plank, high push-up. Again, choosing the variation that you are most comfortable with. Shift your weight forward, squeeze your elbows in by your sides. Come up through the back bend of your choice. And then send your hips up and back to downward facing dog. Take one more breath here. Look between your hands, bend your knees, step through to your forward fold. Inhale through to flat back. Exhale back to forward fold. And on strong legs, sweep your arms up overhead, come stand, palms touch. Exhale, palms to heart center. And lower them all the way down to your side, palms facing open in mountain pose. Take 2 nice deep breaths here. And then, simple finish. Just find your pillow. Again, doesn't really matter what kind of pillow it is. It could even be a rolled up blanket. We're basically going to be finishing in a version of fish pose. Fish pose, we normally use blocks, but again, we're using whatever someone would normally have at home. And it basically is just placed underneath or down your spine so that when you lay back on it, it helps to open up the chest. And because we've just done a bunch of planks and push-ups, this might be a nice way to finish up by opening up the chest and just relaxing. You can do whatever wrist movements might feel good for you, but just place it so that it would be underneath your back, kind of center of your back, folding all the way over it, and then you can put your legs wherever you want. If this is uncomfortable for you, you can bend your knees. That might take some pressure out of your low spine. You can also take the cobbler's pose legs if you would like a bit of a hip stretch. Find whatever feels best for you, and then place your arms wherever gives you a nice good stretch too. That might be like way up to the side, maybe up overhead. Freedom for whatever position feels best for you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel a little more confident in your planks and push-ups, and that you understand why the positioning is what it is, and just gives you some more clarity and confidence as you come into classes in the future. If you have any questions, please let me know. Owen and I are always happy and eager to help out however we can. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on Tuesday.